Have you ever tried recording and you hear this annoying echo in your headphones that makes it almost impossible to get a good take? This is called latency. It's the delay that you hear between what you record into your computer and what comes out of your monitors. So there are a bunch of different reasons that this can occur. So let's talk about the most crucial factors that can make latency performance worse and potentially ruin your recordings. So let's dive into what latency is a little bit deeper. So analog components don't really add much to latency, but the process of converting analog to digital and then digital back to analog creates a delay that we call latency. This delay adds up, resulting in the total delay between audio input, a microphone, and your output, either your speakers or headphones. This total value is known as round-trip latency. In most DAWs, you can see your round-trip latency calculated for you based on your current settings. And when you don't want to put up with any latency, you can use direct monitoring. Most audio interfaces have an option for direct monitoring that lets you hear the signal in your headphones before it goes through any analog to digital conversion that can create delay. So when it's activated, you're going to hear the output latency on playback, but you're going to hear what you're recording in real time. So the upside of direct monitoring is that you get virtually zero latency no matter what your buffer sizes are, but the downside is that you only hear your dry signal. And this can sound a little bit odd if you're recording guitars DI with amp sims, or if you like recording your vocals with a little bit of compression and reverb in the mix. But I have a simple workaround if you want to monitor with reverb while using direct monitoring. So in your DAW, you'll need to do the following steps. Create a pre-fader send from your vocal track to an aux track where you can add a reverb effect. Next, you'll need to make sure that software monitoring is turned on. Then you'll need to turn down the fader on the track you're recording so that you don't hear a duplicate of the dry signal. Next, you can balance the level of the effect with the aux fader. So here are the factors that directly influence your latency performance. The first one is audio driver. The second one is audio interface connectivity. So whether it's USB 2.0 or Thunderbolt. The third one is buffer size and CPU power, and the fourth is sample rate. So let's talk about audio drivers. An audio driver manages your audio signal from recording to playback and manages the communication between your computer and your audio interface. A better audio driver leads to better latency performance. The important takeaway here is that the recommendation of the audio interface manufacturer is usually going to yield the best results. For example, Windows computers often use an ASIO-based driver, but some manufacturers of audio interfaces make dedicated drivers for Windows that can greatly improve your latency performance, whereas Mac computers use the dedicated core audio. So let's talk about audio interface connectivity. So before I go too much into detail, just know that unless you have a really high track count, recording a bunch of inputs simultaneously, a USB 2.0 bus is going to have more than enough capacity for signal processing at low latency latency. So long story short is don't nerd out about connectors. Instead, just make sure your audio interface has a good audio driver and you'll be good to go. Buffer size and CPU power are connected, so let's look at them together. A buffer basically buys time for your CPU by delaying the data stream and introducing latency. You can set your buffer size in your DAW or audio interface settings. Low buffer sizes lead to high CPU usage, and high buffer sizes lead to lower CPU usage. So a low buffer size means less latency, but a higher chance of glitches or dropouts, and high buffer size means more latency, but more stability with less chance of dropouts or glitches. So the general rule here is you want to use low buffer size for recording and high buffer size for mixing. Because when you're recording, you want to hear as close to real time as possible so that that delay doesn't throw off your performance. However, most people don't notice latencies that are under 10 milliseconds. So if the round trip latency on your audio interface is under 10 milliseconds, then you'll probably be good to go. So if you have a modern computer, set your buffer size to the lowest possible setting and you'll get the best latency performance. But be sure to listen back to your recording for any glitches or dropouts. And if you hear some, be sure to raise your buffer size to the next lowest setting. Some DAWs have low latency modes that automatically bypass the most CPU intensive plugins, but an alternative solution to this is just to freeze your tracks or bounce them in place to free up resources. This can be really helpful if you're using a lot of software instruments or a lot of complex processing chains. At the mixing stage, you'll be using more effects like compression and EQs and reverbs, and you probably won't need real-time monitoring. So at this stage, you can turn your buffer size to the highest possible setting and achieve a lot more stability and less chance of glitches. So if you're still running low on CPU resources and you need a little bit more CPU power for mixing, there's a couple things you can do. One is to close all other programs or applications that might be using up your RAM. And two is to freeze your tracks or bounce them in place or commit them. DAWs often have this feature to easily render a track with lots of plugins so that it's not taking up those resources in real time. And then you can usually turn it off and retweak settings whenever you need to later. So since buffers are measured in samples and sample rate is measured in frequency, we can use these values in a simple equation to calculate the latency. All right, so let's try this for real. So we're gonna assume a sample rate of 48 kilohertz, which is great for music and podcasts. And we're gonna try to get low latency. So we're gonna use a buffer size of 64 samples. Now, since hertz is a measure of how many wave cycles per second, and we want our answer in milliseconds, it actually makes this equation super easy. So we're just gonna take 64 samples and we're gonna divide that by 48 kilohertz. Sorry for my terrible penmanship. And that equals 1.3 milliseconds of latency. So why is this value so low? Well, it only considers one buffer stage, and there are other components in the processing path that might introduce more latency. But you can see that higher sample rates are going to give us lower latency values overall. Higher sample rates result in bigger file sizes and can be heavier to your system, especially the RAM of your computer during recording and playback. So to sum it up, when you're optimizing for latency, you should make sure to use the driver that the audio interface manufacturer recommends, and you should use lower buffer sizes for recording and higher buffer sizes for mixing. Lewitt, audio gear for better sound.